Well, a warm welcome to today's talk, Friday the 10th of December. And I want to do an international update on what's going on in the Omicron situation. Now, I think what we need to realise is that where South Africa is now, the United Kingdom will probably be in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and the United States will be a few weeks after that. This is kind of the progression of the spread of Omicron. So we need to look at what's going on in South Africa to find out what's going to be happening to us pretty soon. So let's go straight on to the orientation slides. And here we do see, it has to be said, quite a steep increase in the amount of hospitalisations in South Africa. So the blue is public and the green is private. So it's the total number we need to look at. So we are indeed seeing an increase in hospitalisations in South Africa. Now, as far as we can tell, the percentage of hospitalisations is not that high. It's the sheer number of people with infections that seems to be the issue here. Now, when we look at the ward situation in South Africa, as we have been doing, so we see that there's 5,300 people in hospital. 404 of those are in intensive care. And bear in mind, this is for the whole country, a population of 40 million. High care, 419. Normal ward care, 4,521. So patients actually in hospital, has to be said, fairly modest numbers at the moment. And then when we look at the degree of care that those patients are requiring, so they're the patients in hospital, that is patients in intensive care, and this is patients that are currently oxygenated in high care. So for the whole country, 734 patients oxygenated, so we're not seeing the massive oxygen demand in the care in South Africa that we saw in the other previous wave. So it's looking like patients are not as ill, which is very, very encouraging. Now, just a few more orientation screens before we get down to some detail. Confirm new cases. Now, this is Slovenia here. We have large cases. Now, we don't have good genomic information on that. We believe this is still Delta, but we don't really know. Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland, Denmark, Ireland, Norway, France, United Kingdom, Germany, United States, Canada, India, Japan, in that order. Japan still following up at the bottom there. We do know there's quite a little bit of Omicron in Denmark. We do know there's quite a bit in Norway. But carrying on with the orientation. Now, here we see that the actual Omicron in red here is just way behind. This data is way out of date. For example, we know that in Denmark there's a lot of Omicron, so our world in data simply not keeping up, but we will carry on seeing an increasing redness of that graphic as we keep an eye on the Omicron over the next days and weeks indeed. A number of patients in hospital. Slovakia, part of the old Czechoslovakia, of course, a lot of patients in hospital there. And indeed, Belgium, hospital patients going up quite significantly. Then Switzerland, United States, France, Netherlands, United Kingdom, Ireland, Denmark, Norway, Canada. And we do notice that Norway and Denmark do have quite large numbers of Omicron patients or confirmed cases, but so far relatively low hospitalizations. So that continues to be encouraging. Now, this is the stringency index. I haven't put this slide on before, but it's quite interesting. This is just sort of this is a stringency index, is a composite measure based on 9 response indicators, including school closures, workplace closures, travel bans. It's basically how much of a restrictive lockdown there is at the moment. And this is the order. Germany with the most restrictions, then going on to Canada, France, Slovakia, Netherlands. You can see that for yourself. So that was quite interesting. Norway with very low restrictions there. So I thought that was just an interesting one to put in, that this is the way that countries are responding to the current pandemic. Newly confirmed cases per million people. South Africa going up dramatically. And we will be seeing this sort of increase in cases in the United Kingdom and the United States and possibly Canada, because this is leading the way. So Omicron charges being led by South Africa, followed by the United Kingdom and Canada, with the United States, where it's in about half the states now, but is still in its process of spreading around in the United States, Hospitalisations in South Africa, as we've seen, have gone up quite sharply, but this is because so many people, we believe, it's because so many people have the infection at the moment. So that's a bit of orientation. Now, going on to a bit of detail, Rochelle Walensky, Centre for Disease Control, of course, the disease is mild in almost all of the cases seen so far in the United States, which is good. Having said that, I think that's based on about 43 cases that the states have identified. Now, of course, there's way more cases than this in the states, but the genomic sequencing is pretty pathetic. So that's all they've managed to definitely confirm so far, but we can assume that we could put a naught on the end of that, I think, quite easily. 75% of cases are vaccinated. So we see that vaccinated people are becoming infected and testing positive with Omicron. This is repeated all over the world now. Scotland is expecting a tsunami of Omicron. Families in Scotland to self-isolate for 10 days if one member tests positive, regardless of their vaccination status, and even if they initially get a negative test. So this is sort of the political response in Scotland. And of course, what this means, if this is maintained, as Omicron increases in Scotland, Scotland is basically going to completely shut down if this is maintained. So it's hard to see how it can be, really. UK government's already working on a Plan C. Parts of Plan B came into force, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, I think. Or was it the day before? And Plan C, in other words, the UK government's preparing for a worse case scenario. Now, UK Health Security Agency. This is their latest twittering. About an hour ago, 1,265 confirmed cases. We can easily put a naught on the end of that. I'm quite sure about that. So there's 20,000 cases in the UK at the moment, something like that. Now, this is from the UK Health Security Agency. Used to be Public Health England. Omicron is displaying a significant growth advantage to Delta, so it's outcompeting Delta. Now, people often ask me, do you think that we're going to end up with Delta and Omicron? And I think what we've seen in South Africa is that the Omicron has replaced the Delta. So I think it's likely it's going to replace it because it is so much more transmissible. People also often ask, can you become infected with two strains of the virus at the same time? For example, could you get Omicron and Delta at the same time? Absolutely you could. And what happens then, we're not really sure, but certainly you could. And indeed, perhaps the reason we have the Omicron variant is because someone got the Delta infection and they had a coronavirus common cold as well, and the two viruses shared their genetic material from co-infection. And we know that if people get COVID and influenza at the same time, that's associated with a worse prognosis. So certainly you can have as many viruses as you're exposed to at the same time. It's not that you only have one at a time. Multiple co-infections are certainly feasible. Likely to outcompete Delta and become the dominant variant, yes. I mean, we've been saying this for about a week on this channel, of course, but it's good to see that the UK Health Security Agency are now confirming this. If the growth rate and doubling time continues, at least 50% of COVID-19 cases to be caused by Omicron variant by mid-December, which is only about, well, when is mid-December? I suppose it's only 5 days away, isn't it, if you think about it. So basically, it's increasing massively. So Omicron, 50% of cases pretty soon, 1 million by the end of December. If 1% are hospitalised, which is probably possible, that would equal 10,000 people over the course of between now and Christmas, so over about a couple of weeks. So I'm optimistic about this. Now, Neil Ferguson, who's been written up in The Guardian again today, is saying up to 10,000 cases per day, but he's been wrong so many times in the past, I'm not even going to mention it this time. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. Lower rates of hospitalisation with Omicron compared to Delta. This is bad. 10,000 people could be admitted to hospital, but over a couple of weeks, even though it's putting a strain on the health service, that is manageable. Let's hope it's not worse than what the South Africa data would tend to intimate, which is what I'm basing that on. Although that is, I can't say that's evidence-based. It's not. It's a bit of a guess, but we'll see how that pans out. Omicron displays a reduction in protection offered by having had a previous infection or vaccination, so immune escape after infection, immune escape after vaccination. In other words, if you've been infected with SARS coronavirus 2 or you've been vaccinated, you can still get Omicron. There's insufficient data to make any assessment of the protection against severe disease. So how much vaccination is going to protect against severe disease, they don't know, although other evidence does suggest that it could be quite significant protection against severe disease. But this is just a UK Health Security Agency kind of catching up. Or to assess the severity of illness caused by Omicron, well, again, the data now from South Africa is becoming fairly convincing that it is less severe. And we saw that was Rochelle Walensky's view as well. So I think the best thing you could say about the UK Security Agency here is they're being very conservative and not making too many claims. Further studies are underway, of course. Now, this is quite an interesting graph. Basically, this shows that... so this is the increase in Omicron here. Basically, it shows that it was in... Now, these are based on... this S gene dropout. So this could have been for other causes. I'm not sure Omicron's been around this long, but I suspect Omicron could definitely have started about here. The cases would have started about there, which takes us to about the 16th of November. So it looks like Omicron has been present in the UK from the 16th of November. And of course, the World Health Organization didn't twig till the 26th. And of course, that means the travel bans were far too late. And now we have ongoing community transmission of Omicron, of course. Lots of other references there to follow the South Africa situation. I'll leave those in the description if you want to follow that on. Now, Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, SAGE. Now, it's fair to say that this group as well has had a pretty mixed record, considering this is supposed to be all the great experts in the country. Their prognostications have often been less than impressive, but it's what we've got at the moment, so it's what we'll go with. Hospital admissions from Omicron should be expected to follow soon. High confidence. Well, this is true. This is true. So we know that if this is time here, time going on there, that as Omicron cases start to increase, hospitalisations will also follow with a delay. The question is, to what degree will they follow? I'm hoping it's going to be kind of like that. It's going to follow it, in that this gap here is going to be sort of consistent-ish, but I'm hopeful it's going to be at low numbers. But the high confidence that it will increase soon, and the South Africa data does show us that hospitalisations increase soon, increase after Omicron has spread, but with lower oxygen requirements in the South African situation. Though there remains some important uncertainties, well, of course, they have to hedge their bets, don't they? Early verbal reports indicate that hospitalisations due to Omicron are now increasing in South Africa. Well, it's not verbal reports, we've just seen it on the graphics. Why don't they look at the South Africa data? Then they wouldn't be saying verbal reports. It's on the South Africa official data. Really makes you wonder sometimes. The doubling time for the new Omicron infection is currently around 3 days in England. So if I'm right, there's about 20,000 cases now. And of course, that means there's going to be 40,000 cases in 3 days' time. 80,000 cases 3 days after that. You can work it out for yourself, 160 through whatever it is. You can see it's not going to take long to get to 1 million, can't you? It really is going to increase exponentially. It's unlikely to be any slower than a 5-day doubling time. So basically they're saying a 3 to 5 day doubling time for the number of cases. And if that carries on, clearly it's going to displace Delta. Household studies show higher secondary attack rates. In other words, if someone in the household gets it, other people in the household are likely to get it, and they're highly confident of that. Of course, it's a highly transmissible variant. So why is it so transmissible? Combination of transmissibility. It seems to hang around in the air for longer. So if someone breathes it out, then it seems to stick around in the air for a longer period of time. These micro droplets, this aerosolization in the air, seems to hang around for longer. Is there a higher viral load that people are putting more virus out? We don't know, probably. Is it that each viral particle has a higher affinity for the human receptor? It could be that as well. But anyway, Sage, this is Sage have said it's increased transmissibility. Pretty obvious, but they've said it anyway. And immune escape. So what they mean here is the people that have had it before and the people that have been vaccinated are no longer protected. Therefore, in other words, the majority of the population is vulnerable to infection. I think we're all going to get this in the next few weeks because of the immune escape. I've been vaccinated, but I still expect to be infected with Omicron. People that have had COVID disease, SARS coronavirus 2 infection, I still expect them to get infected with Omicron, hopefully virtually or with minimal or no symptoms. But it's as if the whole population is now vulnerable and naive all over again. Although we do believe there's good early evidence that protection from severe disease and hospitalisation is going to be there as a result of the immunity we already have. But the infection is going to be everywhere. That means everyone's going to be infected. That's potentially a good thing, because it means that everyone's infected, therefore everyone will develop a level of immunity, because the infection will generate an immune response specific to the Omicron variant. And if you have an immune response to the Omicron variant, I would expect a degree of cross-immunity to the other coronaviruses as well. How much cross-immunity, of course, we don't know, but I would expect there to be some. So I would expect someone who's infected with Omicron to enjoy some protection from future variants of SARS coronavirus 2, certainly in terms of protection against severe disease, hospitalisation and death. We don't know for sure, but I would be very surprised if that's not the case. Some early indications from South Africa suggest less severe disease in those hospitalised, correct? A modest reduction in severity would not avert high numbers of hospitalisations if growth rates remain high. So instead of having about 4% of patients in hospital, even if we just add 0.4% of patients in hospital, then if a few million people get it all at the same time, as we said, that comes out to large numbers. My estimate there was about 1% by Christmas, which would be 10,000 potential hospitalisations. Which is perhaps slightly less than we're getting now in that time period, or round about what we're getting now, even though the numbers are increasing dramatically. That's probably what's going to happen. Sage is saying 1,000 per day by the end of the month. Then they're saying the peak is likely to be higher, 1,000 to 2,000 Omicron hospitals per day without interventions. That depends how much closing down we do to prevent the spread. If we have a plan C, of course, it's going to be less than that. And instead of doing the cases doing this and getting it all over within a few weeks, we can, as Boris Johnson said, flatten the sombrero, and it'll be more like that. But if people aren't getting hospitalised, the herd immunity will develop if we have large-scale exposure in a short period of time, I believe. For it is to be below this level, there would be if it's going to be below this level, there'd only need to be a small degree of immune escape and very high protection. So we're hoping for a small degree of immune escape. We're hoping for high protection from boosters, but we don't know. So they're saying it could easily be. They're expecting 1,000 to 2,000, but if it is going to be below that, these criteria would have to be met. With very rapid doubling times, a large wave could occur, leading to synchronous absence from work. Well, in the Scottish case, where everyone has to self-isolate, that's certainly going to be the case. The country will close down. In the UK, you can get away with, in England rather, you can get away with daily testing. Scotland, you need to isolate. With lags of the order of 2 weeks or more, of course, before people get sick. And doubling times in the order of 3 days, it's likely that once hospitalisations begin to increase, there's going to be a similar rate of increase, just with the delay. And here is an example. 4 doublings, that's a 16-fold increase, of course, or more could already be in the system. So if there's going to be 16 times more cases already baked into the system, and the hospitalisations were the same as they are now, which we believe they're not, fortunately, then there'd be 16 times more hospitalisations. But of course, we don't believe that is the case. A great role for airborne transmission. This is very airborne compared to previous variants, it looks like. And last point I want to make here, ventilation, well-fitting masks, distancing or reduced density of people in indoor environments may be even more protective because of the airborne nature. So that's the update for today. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Governments and these official agencies are correctly being more conservative, and they have to prepare for the worst. So I understand that, but I'm hoping for much better based on the South Africa data, and indeed based on that data we looked at yesterday from Norway. Now, I was talking to a technician, we're finished now, I was talking to a technician, and he said the downloads of the books have been well over 100,000, so that's, if everyone reads them, I'll be delighted. So remember the pathophysiology book on disease, the physiology book on normal body functioning, available for free download. So well over 100,000, so that's great. I feel justified for having spent 3 years each writing them now, so that's good. Now, slight correction now, interesting. So this is a bit of a scientific point, but an interesting one. Now, we did quote Professor Frunland, Norwegian Institute of Public Health. It might be that it is now replicated and mutated so many times that this is the optimal position from the new virus's point of view to spread widely and not kill the hosts. So this is what we quoted Professor Frunland as saying. That's what we've seen with other diseases beforehand. And of course, then it gets into more of an endemic phase. And yesterday, I think I did agree with this, that sometimes diseases do become milder so that the virus can spread. But Michael's picked me up on this, and it turns out that technically, well, no, not technically, I was wrong. So Michael says this, in your talk about the Oslo party, you embraced another wrong reference that many people like to believe. So good. The claim that viruses tend to become less lethal because not killing their host keeps the viruses in the host alive too, and enables the host to keep infecting, makes the virus more contagious. So this is kind of what we were saying. So this is what we were saying, that if the virus doesn't kill the host, the virus will stay alive for longer and there'll be more transmission. Therefore, it's in the virus's evolutionary interest to not kill their host. Therefore, it's in the virus should evolve to become weaker. But this is not correct, as Michael points out. And he's right when we think about it. This claim may be contested even in the general case. Okay, well, we won't argue about that one. But it's certainly wrong for SARS coronavirus too. Since, as you pointed out many times, and of course you're quite correct, Michael, the death of the victim almost always happens after he is no longer infectious. So by this time, the virus has cleared off. The virus has already reproduced and gone off to infect someone else. So whether the individual goes on to die when the virus has finished with them is irrelevant to the virus. It won't bring about a selection pressure. So Michael's quite right that that the virus is not, that SARS coronavirus 2 particularly has not got this selection pressure to become less virulent and less pathogenic, because by the time it does kill people, the virus doesn't care, it's already moved on. The virus is only reproducing in the infectious stage for the first week or so, or even less, in most people about the first week. And therefore, if the patient goes on to die after that, the virus doesn't care, which is absolutely true. The death of the victim almost happens after he is no longer infectious, and this means that prolonging the life of the victim does not prolong the period of infectivity. So there you go. There's no evolutionary pressure in that sense for the virus not to kill their host. Therefore, the idea that natural selection would select for a virus which does not kill their host is wrong, because to the virus, whether it survives or not, the death of the host is irrelevant. We tend to say that the virus thinks this, or the virus wants that thing or the other, and of course that's not what we mean. What we mean is this is the outcoming of the selection pressures both positively and negatively, that will affect the virus and therefore affect its reproduction. So thanks for that, Michael. Bad news, though, it means that there's no evolutionary selection pressure for the virus, in the case of SARS coronavirus 2, to evolve to cause milder disease, because by the time someone dies, the virus has already moved on. So there you go. Always good to be corrected. You are my peer reviewers. So thank you for that. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for watching.